I loved anime growing up, but by the time I went to animation school, especially in the United States, I was told not to learn from anime. And I've been given many reasons on why I should do that. And for a while, I followed those reasons where I just focused on whatever my teachers would feed us. But I think over time, I'm also starting to embrace the things that did inspire me while learning animation, which of course was anime. So for this video, I kind of just want to talk about why the teachers I had looked down on anime. Hey guys, it's Toniko Pantoja, and today I want to talk about this dogma that a lot of my art teachers and animation teachers in the past have forced down my throat, which is not to learn from anime or don't draw the anime style. Which is crazy because one of the biggest reasons why I got into animation was due to my exposure of anime. I grew up with anime, JRPGs from the 90s, games with the anime style, manga, or even toys. Now, I spent a good chunk of my life growing up in Asia, so anime was already a pretty normal thing, but it wasn't as mainstream as it is now. Like before, it was mostly people who appreciated anime. Nowadays, you're getting people who never really were big into anime, but enjoyed anime, and that stuff is a lot more public. Now, fast forwarding to learning animation formally, there was this recurring rule that a lot of my animation and art teachers would always boast or preach, which is don't work any anime style, just study Disney's Nine Old Men, classical animation. We heard the names Milt Kahl, Glenn Keane, James Baxter, a lot of American or American adjacent artists that we should be studying from. We weren't really encouraged to study from anime. And the sad thing is, I did take this to heart because if you saw my work during school and my work early in my career, I was trying to be more of like a Disney Pixar story artist. That was the kind of style that I wanted to draw in. Fast forward to now, I've been trying to study more anime. I've been trying to study the things that I did like growing up, why it worked. I've been trying to study the style itself. I've actually done some freelance work in anime, which is a whole beast of its own. So with that being said, for this video, I do want to talk about the reasons why a lot of my mentors or teachers back in the day were against students learning and practicing in the anime style. And maybe talk about why it might be a good idea to learn from anime. So the first reason I do want to bring up is that in America, there wasn't a lot of productions that worked in the anime style. You'll get anime inspired stuff, but it's not really the same. And a lot of the stuff that is much closer to the anime style had a lot of their pre-production work outsourced to a vendor studio. Same with production, which actually consists animating the thing. Now, I could sort of agree to this sentiment because back when I was learning animation and trying to break into the animation industry in the United States, there were only a few shows that had the anime style. Nowadays, it's a different beast because there's a lot of productions that look specifically for anime influences or a bit of anime knowledge. Another thing to consider is that the landscape of being able to work in, let's say, actual anime, like actual anime productions in Japan, is a lot more accessible than it was back then. Also, educational resources for that field is a lot more abundant. However, when it comes to income and monetary benefits, especially if you're living in an area with a high living cost, the anime industry pays very low for the amount of work that you might have to do. So just to summarize my point, nowadays there's a lot more productions and work that do have a lot more anime influence than 10 years ago. Also, we had teachers and mentors that never really worked in that field, so they couldn't really tell you or teach about it. Another reason that I'd like to bring up is that anime was always associated with amateurish art. So that's what my mentors and teachers would say. And I can kind of understand their point because if you were to look up of fan art of an existing fandom, and let's say it's a fandom that doesn't have the anime style, you're going to get an anime version of those characters, but drawn pretty crudely because the artists are usually young, they're inexperienced, and therefore that whole anime style is linked to that inexperienced art, which I personally don't think it's fair to link up anime with inexperienced skills. Anime is just pretty popular, so I can also understand why there's a lot of younger artists who draw everything in that style, but there's a lot of really great art, illustration, or animation that uses the anime style. The next one I want to talk about is sort of the stigma with the anime genre. So there could obviously be a debate and conversation about this because I feel like a lot of the stigma that they're talking about is based on the content of anime because sometimes you get stuff that's like super ecchi, maybe perverted, or super violent. The characters are edgy in an immature way. Or maybe it's an overall cultural thing. I will admit that when I was trying to learn how to draw, I took inspiration from a lot of the anime that I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, and the way they depicted women were often sexualized, and it actually affected my art where I just drew women like that by default without thinking about it as if it was a sexual thing. It just became a habit. And I didn't notice it was a thing until my classmates pointed it out, until my friends pointed it out, and that's when I got a lot more self-conscious about this whole anime style. Honestly, I will say that I got a little ashamed and embarrassed when I would share my work and someone would go, ugh, anime. And I was like, oh, damn it. I mean, back then, anime wasn't mainstream. It was mostly seen as this super otaku or nerdy geeky thing, which it still is, but it's definitely a lot more accepted nowadays. But I do think the contents of anime did contribute to why it was looked down within art schools, especially in America. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is anime was associated with cheap, limited animation styles. And this one's a kind of a weird take because the animation found in anime is spectacular. It can be stylish, it can be detailed, it can be fluid, but it can also be very cost effective too, which could sometimes mean less drawing. And I feel like there's a stigma with anime because a lot of the shots found in anime are limited animation still shots or very little to no movement, cheap animation. And of course, back then, a lot of animation teachers in the US loved the whole Disney Renaissance, the old classical style of animation where everything was fully in between, the acting was fluid and very detailed, which of course is a style that I love too, but there's a lot to value with the economy found within the anime style. I mean, personally, I think it's just different. I think the thing that I love about anime sometimes is how a still drawing just resonates with you and just sticks in your memory. And the same thing can be said with a very well, fully Disney-style animated shot. I think also when you get something with full detailed acting that's like fully in between, animated in twos and ones, it was just seen as more prestigious, expensive, high quality, high production, whatever that may be. I mean, I personally think it's good to try every style, whether it's a fully animated Disney style of animation along with, let's say, a more economic anime approach. Also, something that you have to consider and something that they don't really teach you in school is how the circumstances that an artist is given does affect a workflow. So things like high quota, limited resources, really tight deadlines, that's also going to affect the style that you work with. Another reason that I can think of why animation teachers and art teachers in schools are against anime is because they're just not a fan of the anime style. I mean, sure, anime has a lot of different styles, but you can tell that it's anime based on certain shape language, overall design choices, and aesthetics. Now, this isn't a conversation of whether the style is good or an exceptional piece of draftsmanship. It's just that they have a preference and they just don't like it. Which is kind of funny because when I was learning animation, our teachers would make us animate characters that kind of had this Elmer Fudd looking ass design. And they'll talk about why that design is so quintessential, but it's just not my favorite thing. I don't find it appealing personally. But I also understand the value of that design, regardless of how much I hate it. Okay, the last one I want to bring up is definitely going to be a controversial one and will definitely cause some either heated or strong conversations. So the thing I want to bring up is there is a slight or an obvious racism amongst Western mentors and animators. Now, when a fellow friend and coworker brought this up, I kind of scoffed at it, but the more I thought about it, the more I started to realize the truth about that. And I do want to give a real life scenario. Actually, two real life scenarios. So in my animation class, we had an in-class animation assignment where we had to finish animating a small test within 3 hours at that time. Our teacher gave us a prompt and model sheet to work with. Now, I remember I asked a question, can we animate in 3s or 6s? Which means a drawing can hold for 3 frames or 6 frames, which is very common in anime. And he said, if you do that, I will kick your ass. None of that Asian shit. And back then, I didn't really consider that. And now that I think about it again, it was a kind of fucked up thing to say. Another scenario was when a teacher was ranting about the acting choices found in anime. So when a character goes like kawaii or "Bleh," or something like that, they would make a big deal out of it. And I feel like that's a huge cultural difference for sure because, an example is that when we see something cute in Western cultures, we go, aw. But in Japan, if they see something cute, they go, "Bleh," which is really just a whole cultural thing. And to criticize that very specific cultural thing is kind of ignorant. And I feel like a lot of those acting characteristics are, of course, found in anime. Now, other points I can bring up that I can't really say it's a universal thing, but I can say that I witnessed it, which is when an American animation mentor gets butthurt because anime is more popular with the students, whereas his favorite Disney style isn't resonating with them. And the only thing that teacher can do is just rant about it or be upset about it. And the anime style was kind of a counterculture or an approach to everything that they grew up with or everything that they learned from. But as much as I talk about teachers that did not like the anime style or discouraged it, I did have teachers that appreciated anime, and some of them encouraged it. Some of them also gave students a bit of a reality check, saying stuff like, there's some great stuff in your anime stuff, but you also have to learn how to adapt to different styles. Which I think is a great advice that can go both ways. I've had teachers encourage the anime style, but also tell students, hey, be careful with putting too much anime work because some American studios actually dismiss portfolios that consist of purely anime work. And it could be related to some of the reasons that I stated earlier in the video. Now, I don't know what the landscape is like now, because nowadays there's a lot of studios or productions that look for people who have some form of anime influence. And even that realm can be pretty picky on who they want on board. I think most of the American teachers that I had that didn't really look up to anime would only make a few exceptions to certain anime, like, of course, Studio Ghibli, or maybe even Satoshi Kon. But they had this weird standard of Disney Renaissance or classical Disney stuff is still top class, which is kind of crazy. So I can't really say or pinpoint when I decided to learn from anime or study anime. I think it was just something that I've always been curious about. Some of my experimentations on the side were heavily inspired by anime techniques, and I think over time I was just letting go of a lot of the dogmas and stigmas that were kind of forced upon me when I was learning animation. I think sometimes I would take inspiration from what I liked about certain drawings from anime and try to incorporate that into my work. And then I think from there I actually tried studying how to draw in the anime style or to get something that felt closer to anime, and over time I eventually did some freelance for a few anime productions. Not a lot, but a few, because anime work is brutal. It's a lot of work for very little pay. Also, the language barrier can be quite an obstacle. You're very dependent on translations or working with someone that can walk you through the process of labeling, notations, and translating things for you on the side. Where I live, the cost of living can be quite high, and people who live in the same area as I do that do work in anime, and some of them have full-time jobs, they do anime work on the side. They usually do it for the love of anime, they do it to learn, or they just do it for clout. Being able to talk and brag about being involved in some of the highest watched and most popular, hottest anime out there right now. Also, it definitely helps when some of them actually do know how to speak a bit of Japanese. I think the reason why I decided to take up anime work was to learn about the overall pipeline doing anime work, improve my draftsmanship, and just to overall gain that experience. I learned to think more about my drawings, understand my process on how to get something more on model with the sete. Now that I know a bit about myself more, I prefer just working on personal projects on the side. And if I wanted to learn the anime approach, I'd rather incorporate that into my personal work. And that's the thing that I do want to bring up, because there's a lot of things that working in the anime style, whether it's animation technique or the drawing style of anime, there's a lot you can learn from that's probably going to only make you better. If it's not for you, it's not for you. I learned that working in anime productions probably isn't for me as a full-time animator. I'm probably not the right cast for it. That's why I've only worked in a small few of them. I'd probably only take a few cuts, but I do love working in that style and its overall approach. I personally think every person interested in 2D animation should try doing some work in anime, whether it's Genga or Nigen or even just layout animation. I personally think it's a boot camp of its own. Did you guys also have mentors that looked down on anime? Please feel free to share some of those reasons in the comments down below. Interested in learning hand-drawn animation or learning how to finish an animated shot from beginning to end? Have a look at the store where you'll find the complete Introduction to 2D Animation video course, tutorials, and other resources. Learn classical animation approaches, drawing, lectures, techniques, and other process videos. Visit the store through the link in the description below.